What family tradition did you realize was actually illegal? My father forced me to fight other boys every week to prove my worth. Not play fighting or wrestling matches supervised by parents in padded gyms. Real fights with blood and broken bones and consequences that lasted for days. It started the week after my 8th birthday when Dad sat me down at the kitchen table and explained what it meant to be a Blackwood man. "We don't raise soft children in this family," he said, his scarred knuckles drumming against the wood. "Every generation has been tested, proven worthy through combat. Your grandfather did it. I did it. Now it's your turn." He slid a notebook across the table, pages filled with names and dates and outcomes recorded in his cramped handwriting. "This is our family record going back 80 years. Every Blackwood son has fought to earn his place. You'll fight every Saturday until you've proven yourself." I was 8 years old and had no idea what proving myself meant. I just knew the pride in my father's eyes as he explained the rules made me want to make him happy. The rules were simple and brutal. Every Saturday, Dad would find another boy around my age and weight class. We'd meet in our garage with the door closed and the windows covered. No padding, no mouth guards, no protective equipment of any kind. Just two kids, and the understanding that the fight ended when someone couldn't continue or tapped out. Dad recorded everything in his notebook. Date, opponent's name, duration, outcome, injuries. He treated it like a science experiment, analyzing my technique and pointing out weaknesses I needed to improve. My mother never came into the garage during fights. She'd stay in the house with the TV volume turned up loud enough to drown out the sounds. My younger sister, Autumn, wasn't allowed anywhere near the garage on Saturdays. This was between father and son, a tradition that women couldn't understand or participate in. My first fight was against a boy named Colin, whose dad worked with mine at the construction company. Colin was bigger than me by at least 20 pounds, and I learned later that Dad had specifically chosen him to teach me that size didn't guarantee victory if you fought smart and mean. I got destroyed that first fight. Colin hit me so hard I saw stars. My lips split open and blood ran down my chin, metallic and warm. I tried to fight back, throwing wild punches that mostly hit air. Dad watched from the corner, not intervening, not stopping it even when I started crying. The fight lasted maybe 3 minutes before I collapsed, too hurt and exhausted to continue. Colin's dad pulled him back, and my father wrote the outcome in his notebook. Loss by exhaustion. Afterward, Dad cleaned my wounds in the garage sink and explained where I'd gone wrong. "You telegraphed every punch. You fought angry instead of smart. You gave up instead of pushing through pain. Next week will be better." I nodded, because what else could I do? This was my family's way. This was how Blackwood men were made. My mother waited until Dad left before coming to check on me, her face pale and her hands shaking as she dabbed antibiotic ointment on my split lip. "Does it hurt badly?" she whispered. I told her I was fine, even though my ribs ached with every breath. The second fight was against a kid named Damien, whose father was one of Dad's old army buddies. Damien had done this before. I could tell from the way he moved, calculated, and controlled. He didn't waste energy on wild swings. Every hit landed exactly where he intended. I lost again, this time with a black eye and a sprained wrist. Dad recorded it in the notebook. Loss by technical skill deficit. He wasn't disappointed, just analytical. "You're learning," he said. "Every loss teaches you something wins can't." The pattern continued for months. Every Saturday, a new opponent. Sometimes I knew the other boy from school or the neighborhood. More often, they were strangers, sons of men in Dad's network who all shared this same twisted tradition. I started winning occasionally by the time I turned 9. The first victory felt amazing. This rush of pride when Dad wrote my name in the winner column. I'd beaten a boy named Lucas who'd underestimated me, and standing over him while he caught his breath made me feel powerful in a way nothing else had. Dad's approval afterward was intoxicating. That's my son. That's a Blackwood. By age 10, I was winning more than I was losing. My body had adapted to the weekly violence. I'd learned to take hits without flinching, to ignore pain until the fight was over, to read opponents and exploit their weaknesses. Dad said I was a natural, that the fighting spirit ran strong in my blood. He started entering me against older boys, tougher opponents who'd been doing this longer. The stakes increased. Injuries became more severe. I broke my nose twice before I turned 11, fractured my hand punching someone's skull, collected scars on my knuckles and face that I'd carry for life. But I also collected wins, each victory recorded in Dad's notebook, proof that I was worthy of the Blackwood name. School became difficult for different reasons. I'd show up Monday morning with fresh bruises and split lips, and teachers would ask questions. I'd lie, say I fell off my bike or got in a scuffle at the park. The school nurse started recognizing a pattern, but I'd learned from Dad exactly what to say to deflect suspicion. "My parents are great. I'm just clumsy. I play rough with friends." The other boys in Dad's fighting network had the same cover stories. We'd see each other at school sometimes, exchange knowing looks but never speak about Saturdays. It was an unspoken rule. What happened in our garages stayed private. This was family business, tradition, not something outsiders would understand. I made one real friend during those years, a kid named Quinn, who moved to our neighborhood when I was 11. Quinn was small and quiet, the kind of kid who got picked on by bullies. I started defending him at school, using the fighting skills Dad had beaten into me for something that felt good and right. Quinn was grateful, stuck to me like a shadow, and eventually, I told him about the Saturday fights. His eyes went wide. That's insane. Your dad makes you fight for real? I shrugged. It's just what Blackwood men do. It's tradition. Quinn looked at me like I'd grown a second head. That's not tradition. That's abuse. The word hit me wrong. Abuse was what happened to kids with bad parents, kids whose fathers hit them for no reason or neglected them. My dad wasn't abusive. He was strict, demanding, preparing me for a hard world. But Quinn's words planted a seed of doubt that grew slowly over the next years. I started paying attention to how other families operated. Friends whose fathers taught them to play catch or fix cars or build things. None of them had fight nights. None of them had notebooks recording victories and defeats. None of them showed up to school with the consistent injuries I carried. Maybe Quinn was right. Maybe this wasn't normal. The doubt made me hesitate during a fight when I was 12. My opponent was a boy named Isaac who fought dirty, going for eyes and throat. I should have matched his aggression, but Quinn's voice was in my head. This is abuse. The hesitation cost me. Isaac landed a hit that knocked me down hard, and I couldn't get back up before the count. Dad recorded the loss with a tight jaw. After Isaac and his father left, Dad made me stay in the garage. What happened out there? You had him. I don't know. I hesitated. Why? I couldn't explain about Quinn, about the seed of doubt, about starting to question everything. So I said I was tired, that I'd had a long week at school. Dad's expression hardened. Excuses are for weak men. Blackwoods don't make excuses. He made me train harder that week. Extra hours in the garage working combinations, building endurance, eliminating any softness that might cause hesitation. By the next Saturday, I was ready to fight without thinking, without questioning. I won brutally against a boy named Leo, and Dad's pride erased the memory of my doubt. This was who I was supposed to be. A fighter. A Blackwood. When I turned 13, Dad said I'd graduated to a new level. You've proven you can win against boys your own age. Now we test you against men. The word sent ice through my veins. Men? How much older? Dad smiled. Old enough to have experience. Young enough that the size difference isn't impossible. You'll be fighting 16, 17-year-olds. The same boys who've been doing this since they were your age. My first fight against an older opponent was terrifying. The boy, Cameron, was 16 with muscles I didn't have, and reach that made my punches fall short. He toyed with me for the first minute, letting me tire myself out throwing useless combinations. Then he came at me seriously, and I understood why Dad had prepared me for this. Cameron hit harder than anyone I'd fought before. Every punch felt like getting hit with a bat. My ribs cracked on the third blow, pain so sharp I couldn't breathe. Dad yelled from the corner, "Don't you dare quit! Blackwoods don't quit!" I fought through broken ribs for another 2 minutes before Cameron decided he'd proven his point and backed off. Technical victory, Dad recorded. But you stayed standing, that's what matters. The hospital visit afterward was carefully choreographed. Dad said I'd fallen off a ladder helping him with construction work. The doctor looked skeptical, but didn't push. Teenage boys and dangerous activities, she muttered while wrapping my ribs. Try to be more careful. If only she knew that being careful wasn't an option in my family. Over the next year, I fought opponents progressively older and more skilled. I lost more than I won, but each loss taught me something. How to protect my ribs when they were already injured. How to fight through pain that would make normal people stop. How to land hits on faster, stronger opponents by being smarter and meaner. Quinn stopped being my friend around this time. He'd tried multiple times to convince me to tell someone about the fights, to get help, to stop participating in what he insisted was abuse. When I refused, choosing loyalty to my father over his concern, Quinn walked away. I watched him make new friends, kids who didn't show up to school looking like they'd been in car accidents. Part of me envied them. Part of me felt superior. They were soft, sheltered, unprepared for the real world. I was being forged into something harder, something better. By 14, I was holding my own against older opponents. The wins started coming more frequently. Dad's pride was obvious, and he started talking about my future. When you're 16, you'll enter the real competitions. Underground fights where money and reputation are on the line. The best fighters from families like ours, all testing themselves against each other. This is what everything has been preparing you for. The idea excited and terrified me in equal measure. Real competitions meant higher stakes, better opponents, a chance to prove I wasn't just good for my age, but actually elite. It also meant more danger, more risk of serious injury or worse. The tradition apparently extended beyond just our immediate family. Dad had 3 brothers, and they'd all raised their sons the same way. I had 4 male cousins I'd never really known, all of them products of the same brutal training. At family gatherings, the fathers would compare notes, while the sons sized each other up, knowing eventually we'd face each other in the garage. My cousin Derek was closest to my age, just 6 months older. We'd been avoiding each other at family events for years, but when I turned 15, our fathers decided it was time. Derek versus me, a fight to determine which branch of the Blackwood family was producing the stronger warrior. The fight happened at our grandfather's house, an old farmhouse with a barn that had apparently hosted family fights for 3 generations. Both our fathers were there, plus our grandfather, uncles, and a few other men from their network. No women, no younger children. This was a sacred tradition, they said. The atmosphere felt different from garage fights. This was formal, ritualistic. Grandfather said a few words about family legacy and Blackwood's strength before Derek and I faced each other in the center of the barn. Derek was good, better than most opponents I'd faced. He'd been trained by his father with the same intensity, developed the same pain tolerance, learned the same dirty techniques. We circled each other for a full minute before engaging, both of us trying to read the other's style. When we finally clashed, it was brutal and technical simultaneously. Every combination I threw, Derek had a counter for. Every opening I created, he was already moving to exploit. The fight lasted longer than any I'd been in, neither of us able to gain decisive advantage. Blood flowed from both our noses, split lips, cuts above eyebrows. My ribs, never fully healed from previous fights, screamed with every twist. Derek's breathing was labored, his left eye swelling shut. But neither of us would quit. Blackwoods don't quit. Finally, after nearly 15 minutes, Derek's stamina broke first. He stumbled on a combination, left himself open, and I landed a hit that dropped him. He tried to get up, collapsed, tried again. His father called it. My son is done. Derek looked devastated by the admission. Our fathers shook hands, and mine beamed with pride while recording the victory. That fight changed something in me. Standing in that barn, bloodied and exhausted, surrounded by men who thought this was normal and good and character building, I finally saw it clearly. This wasn't tradition. This was systematic child abuse disguised as family legacy. We weren't being made stronger. We were being damaged physically and psychologically. Taught that violence was the measure of worth, that causing and enduring pain was what made us men. Quinn had been right all along. I went home that night, and for the first time looked up information about child abuse. What I found described my life perfectly. Physical abuse, emotional manipulation, isolation from people who might intervene. The websites all said the same thing. This isn't normal. This isn't okay. You deserve help. I spent hours reading stories from other survivors, people whose families had inflicted trauma and called it love. I wasn't alone. What was happening to me was happening to others. And it could stop if I was brave enough to speak up. But speaking up meant betraying Dad, destroying the family tradition, proving I was weak after all. The internal war kept me silent for weeks. The decision was made for me when I was paired against a boy named Felix, who was 17 and had a reputation for not knowing when to stop. Dad warned me before the fight. Felix has hospitalized opponents before. You need to be defensive, smart, willing to quit if things go too far. But Blackwoods don't quit, I said, throwing his own words back at him. He looked uncomfortable. Sometimes tactical retreat is the smartest move. Today might be one of those days. The fight with Felix was the worst experience of my life. He came at me like he was trying to kill me, not just win. Every hit was aimed at vulnerable spots. Throat, kidneys, the back of my head. I tried to defend, but Felix was too fast, too vicious. Within 2 minutes, I was on the ground, taking hits I couldn't block. I heard my father yelling to stop the fight. Heard Felix's father trying to pull him back. Felix landed one more kick to my ribs before they managed to separate us. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Everything hurt in ways that transcended normal pain. Dad carried me to his truck, and for the first time in 7 years of fighting, took me to the emergency room without a cover story. The ER doctor took one look at me and called security. This wasn't caused by falling off a ladder or rough play. These are defensive wounds consistent with assault. Who did this to you? I looked at Dad, who was shaking his head slightly, silently begging me to lie. But I was done lying, done protecting a tradition that had nearly gotten me killed. I told the doctor everything. The Saturday fights, the family tradition, 7 years of systematic abuse disguised as character building. Dad's face went white, then red. I heard him arguing with hospital staff about parental rights and family business. Security asked him to leave while they called the police and social services. A detective arrived while I was getting x-rays for my cracked ribs and possible internal bleeding. Detective Owens was patient and kind, letting me tell the story at my own pace. She recorded everything, asked for names of other boys who'd been involved, wanted details about the adults who'd organized and supervised the fights. I gave her everything I had, including Dad's notebook, which was still in his truck. That notebook became the key evidence. 7 years of recorded fights, dozens of boys' names, proof of systematic organized abuse across multiple families. When Detective Owens saw it, her expression went dark. This is bigger than one family. This is a criminal network. Over the next days, the investigation exploded. Police interviewed every boy I'd named, every family involved. Most parents denied everything at first, claiming I was lying or exaggerating. But the medical records didn't lie. 15 boys between ages 8 and 17, all with histories of injuries consistent with fighting. All with similar cover stories about being clumsy or playing rough. The pattern was undeniable. My father was arrested, along with 11 other men who'd participated in organizing or supervising the fights. They were charged with child abuse, endangerment, and conspiracy. The adults tried to claim it was mutual combat, that the boys had consented. The prosecutors shut that down fast. Children can't consent to abuse. Period. Dad called me from jail, and I almost didn't answer. When I did, he wasn't apologetic. He was furious. You destroyed our family, destroyed generations of tradition, made us all look like criminals when we were just trying to make you strong. I hung up without responding. There was nothing to say to someone who still believed beating children was an acceptable parenting strategy. Mom filed for divorce immediately, claiming she'd never approved of the fighting, that Dad had done it behind her back. That was partially true. She'd never actively participated, but she'd known and done nothing to stop it. That made her complicit. CPS got involved, evaluating whether Autumn and I could safely stay with Mom. The investigator asked tough questions about Mom's role, about what she knew and when. Mom cried through the interviews, insisting she'd been afraid of Dad, that she'd wanted to stop it, but didn't know how. I'm not sure I believed her entirely, but the alternative was foster care, and I'd already lost enough. Autumn was traumatized by everything. She'd known vaguely about the Saturday fights, but never understood the extent. Knowing her brother had been systematically abused for years while she watched TV with the volume up had shattered something in her. She stopped talking to Mom for weeks, angry that the adults who should have protected me had failed so completely. The trial was a media circus. Local news picked up the story, underground child fighting ring exposed, and suddenly, our family's private shame was public entertainment. I had to testify, sitting in a courtroom full of strangers while describing years of fights in clinical detail. Defense attorneys tried to make me look like a willing participant, like I'd enjoyed the violence. Parts of that were true. I had felt pride in winning, had wanted Dad's approval, but that didn't make it okay. That didn't make it not abuse. The prosecution brought in psychologists who explained how children in abusive situations often defend their abusers, how I'd been conditioned to see violence as love and approval as worth any price. The jury looked increasingly disturbed as the full scope of the operation came out. This wasn't just family fights. This was organized, systematic, spanning multiple generations and families. The men had even discussed expanding it, creating larger tournaments, betting on outcomes. It was a full criminal enterprise built on child abuse. All 11 men were convicted. Dad got the longest sentence, 12 years, because the notebook proved he'd been one of the primary organizers. The other fathers got 5 to 8 years depending on their level of involvement. The boys involved all reacted differently. Some, like Derek, were angry at me for exposing the tradition and destroying their relationships with their fathers. Others were relieved, grateful someone had finally stopped something they'd been too scared to speak about themselves. A few had been so thoroughly conditioned they still insisted this was normal, that we were all being punished for something that had made us strong. I started therapy immediately. Dr. Kensington specialized in trauma from child abuse, and she helped me understand how the fighting had affected my development. I'd learned to solve problems with violence, to measure my worth by my ability to hurt others, to disconnect from my body during pain. These patterns didn't disappear just because the abuse stopped. They required years of work to unlearn. Physical therapy helped with the accumulated damage. My ribs had been fractured multiple times and healed poorly. My hands had arthritis from repeated breaks. I had chronic pain in my back and shoulders from the years of impacts. I was 15 years old with the body of someone much older who'd been through wars. School was different after everything came out. Everyone knew who I was, the kid from the fighting ring family. Some people treated me like a victim to be pitied. Others thought I was dangerous, violent, someone to avoid. A few kids approached me wanting to hear war stories, treating the abuse like it was something cool and exciting. I hated all of it. I just wanted to be normal, but normal wasn't possible anymore. Quinn reached out after the trial, apologizing for walking away when I'd needed him. I told him he'd been right to protect himself, that I hadn't been ready to hear the truth back then. We rebuilt our friendship slowly, carefully. Quinn never asked about the fights unless I brought it up first. He'd just invite me to play video games or watch movies, normal teenage stuff that helped me remember there was life beyond violence. I graduated high school at 17, 2 years after the trial. Autumn was doing better by then, back to talking to Mom, processing her own trauma around failing to protect me. Mom and I had a complicated relationship. I didn't fully forgive her for her inaction, but I understood she'd been a victim in some ways too, trapped by her own fear and learned helplessness. She'd started therapy and was working through her guilt. I got accepted to a state university for social work. I wanted to help other kids trapped in abusive situations, wanted to be the person who intervened before years of damage became permanent. My experiences gave me perspective most social workers don't have. I could spot the signs of systematic abuse, recognize the defense mechanisms kids use to protect their abusers. During my first internship, I worked with a boy named Isaac whose father was beating him regularly, but calling it discipline. Isaac defended his father fiercely, insisting he deserved the beatings, that his father was just trying to make him better. I saw myself in Isaac so clearly it hurt. I shared parts of my story with him, not all the details, but enough. I told him about thinking my father's abuse was love, about defending the tradition that was destroying me, about how much better life got once I stopped making excuses for violence. Isaac cried when I finished. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was crazy for thinking something was wrong. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. We got Isaac removed from his father's custody and into therapy. Watching him start to heal reminded me why I'd chosen this path. I'm 23 now. Dad gets out of prison next year, and I don't plan to see him. He's sent letters that I haven't opened. Mom says he's remorseful, that prison changed him, that he understands now that what he did was wrong. Maybe that's true. But remorse doesn't undo 7 years of systematic abuse. It doesn't give me back the childhood I lost or fix the chronic pain I'll carry forever. Derek reached out last year, the cousin I'd fought in grandfather's barn. He'd been in therapy too, working through his own trauma. We met for coffee and talked about the tradition, about how our fathers had damaged us. Derek admitted he'd hated me for years after the trial, blamed me for destroying the family. But therapy helped him see that I'd saved us, that we'd been on a path towards serious injury or death. We're not close, but we're not enemies anymore. Just two survivors trying to make sense of shared trauma. I still have nightmares about the fights sometimes. Wake up with my heart racing, hands clenched into fists, ready to defend against an attack that isn't coming. Dr. Kensington says PTSD from prolonged childhood trauma can take decades to fully process. I'm working on it. The question that started this was, what family tradition did I realize was actually illegal? For me, it was forced fighting. Weekly violence disguised as character building, systematic abuse wrapped in talk about legacy and strength. But I've learned through my work that lots of families have traditions that cross legal and ethical lines. Parents who force extreme dieting on children and call it health consciousness. Families who practice corporal punishment severe enough to qualify as abuse, but defend it as discipline. Religious communities that isolate children and call it protection. The common thread is always the same. Adults with power using tradition as justification for harmful behavior, and children who don't know any different, accepting the harm as normal until someone outside the system points out the truth. If you're reading this and something about your family's traditions makes you uncomfortable, if you're being hurt physically or emotionally but told it's for your own good, if you're isolated and told it's protection, trust your instincts. That discomfort is your mind recognizing that something is wrong. You deserve safety and respect and kindness, regardless of what your family's tradition demands. And speaking up, though terrifying, might be the thing that saves not just you, but others trapped in the same cycle. I spent 7 years being systematically abused and thinking it was love. I've spent the last 8 years healing and helping others heal. The tradition ended with me, and every day I'm grateful I found the courage to break the cycle, even though it cost me everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. That's my answer. That's my story. And if it helps even one person recognize their own situation and reach out for help, then maybe all that pain served some purpose after all. Thanks for hanging out till the end. If you want more stories, make sure to subscribe and leave your take below.